There is a silent experience that many people live with every single day, yet rarely talk about: the feeling of being invisible. Not ignored occasionally, not overlooked by accident, but deeply unseen on an emotional level. Psychology explains that this sensation does not come from one moment, but from repeated experiences where a person's thoughts, feelings, or presence were dismissed or minimized. Over time, the mind begins to internalize a dangerous belief: what I feel doesn't matter. This belief slowly shapes behavior, communication, and self-worth. People who feel invisible often become excellent observers of others while completely disconnected from their own needs, learning to survive by staying quiet, agreeable, and emotionally contained. From a psychological perspective, invisibility is not a personality trait, it is a learned adaptation. When someone grows up in environments where emotional expression was ignored, mocked, or punished, the brain associates visibility with danger. Speaking up feels risky. Being noticed feels unsafe. So the nervous system chooses what it believes is protection: silence. This is why many emotionally intelligent and deeply empathetic people struggle to advocate for themselves. Their brains learned early that staying small reduced conflict, even if it increased internal suffering. What looks like shyness or introversion is often a sophisticated survival strategy developed long before adulthood. One of the most painful aspects of emotional invisibility is that it often goes unnoticed, even by the person experiencing it. Psychology calls this emotional neglect normalization. When neglect is consistent, the mind stops recognizing it as harm. Instead, it becomes normal. People begin to lower their expectations of connection, affection, and understanding. They convince themselves that needing less is a strength. But the human nervous system is not designed to thrive in emotional isolation. The absence of validation slowly erodes self-trust, making individuals doubt their perceptions, minimize their pain, and struggle to identify what they actually want from life. Emotionally invisible people often develop a paradoxical skill. They become deeply attuned to others while remaining disconnected from themselves. Psychology explains that this hyper-awareness of external emotional cues develops as a way to anticipate rejection or conflict before it happens. By reading the room, managing others' moods, and avoiding emotional disruption, they maintain a sense of safety. However, this constant outward focus comes at a cost. Their own emotions are suppressed, delayed, or ignored until they surface as exhaustion, anxiety, or emotional numbness. What was once a survival skill becomes a source of chronic inner tension. Another psychological consequence of invisibility is the fear of being a burden. Many people who feel unseen believe that expressing needs will inconvenience others or push them away. This belief does not come from reality, it comes from past emotional experiences where vulnerability was met with dismissal. Over time, the mind forms an internal rule: if I need too much, I will lose connection. This leads to self-abandonment. They give more than they receive, listen more than they speak, and stay longer in unbalanced relationships, hoping that one day their effort will be noticed without them having to ask. Psychology also reveals that invisibility affects identity formation. When a person's emotions are consistently overlooked, they struggle to define who they are outside of their usefulness to others. Their sense of self becomes externally anchored. They feel valuable when they help, support, or solve problems, but feel empty when alone. This creates an unstable identity that depends on validation. The absence of external recognition can feel like emotional freefall. Without realizing it, they chase visibility through productivity, people-pleasing, or perfectionism, believing that if they become enough, they will finally be seen. The most dangerous part of emotional invisibility is not loneliness, it is self-erasure. Over time, people stop sharing opinions, stop expressing preferences, and stop acknowledging their own emotional reactions. Psychology describes this as adaptive dissociation, a gradual detachment from one's inner world. The person functions, succeeds, and appears calm, but internally feels disconnected and unreal. This is why many high-functioning individuals experience sudden burnout or emotional collapse. The nervous system can only suppress authentic expression for so long before demanding attention. Healing invisibility does not begin with others, it begins with awareness. Psychology emphasizes that recognition precedes transformation. When someone understands that their silence was learned, not chosen, shame begins to dissolve. They stop seeing themselves as weak and start seeing themselves as adaptive. This shift is powerful. It allows individuals to approach change with compassion instead of self-criticism. They begin practicing small acts of visibility, expressing preferences, setting boundaries, acknowledging emotions without apology. Each act retrains the nervous system to associate visibility with safety instead of threat. As emotional visibility increases, discomfort often follows. The brain resists change, even positive change, because familiarity feels safer than growth. People may feel guilt, anxiety, or fear when they start expressing themselves. Psychology explains this as identity resistance. The old version of the self feels threatened, but staying invisible has a cost far greater than temporary discomfort. Each moment of authentic expression strengthens emotional resilience and self-trust. Slowly, the internal narrative changes from "I don't matter" to "my experience is valid." Ultimately, the psychology of invisibility reveals a profound truth. People don't disappear because they lack depth. They disappear because they learned that being seen was unsafe. But safety can be relearned, visibility can be practiced, and identity can be rebuilt. The moment someone understands why they became invisible, they regain choice. They no longer live as a background presence in their own life. They begin to exist fully, emotionally, and consciously. And once that shift happens, invisibility is no longer a prison. It becomes a chapter that no longer defines who they are.